On Christmas Eve, as I placed a steaming bowl of pumpkin soup on the table, my son stood and shouted, "You're selfish. Those empty bedrooms should go to her parents." My daughter-in-law sneered, "You don't deserve this big house while my parents live in a motel." I calmly said no. Seconds later, she hurled the boiling soup at my shoulder. I smiled, grabbed my keys, and texted my lawyer 4 words. "Thank you for being here with me." Before we dive in, drop a quick comment. For me, have you ever had to protect yourself from family, yes or no? I read your comments more than you think. Thank you for sharing. Some details have been adjusted for storytelling. What I hope stays with you is the heart of this story, the message itself. "You're being selfish," my son said, standing up from the table with his napkin still in his hand. Christmas Eve. The dining room smelled like pumpkin soup and pine from the tree in the corner. 6 candles flickered on the white tablecloth. My son Kingsley, 35 years old, wearing the gray sweater his mother bought him 3 Christmases ago, stood there looking at me like I was a stranger who had wandered into his house by mistake. "I'm sorry," I said. He threw the napkin down beside his plate. Vivica, his wife of 5 years, sat beside him with her arms crossed tight against her chest. She was 32, sharp-featured, dark-haired, and I could see her parents, Delbert and Bernice Gallagher, 60 and 58, respectively, sitting frozen at the far end of the table like statues carved from ice. "You heard me, Dad." Kingsley's voice was louder now, echoing off the walls. "You are so selfish. Mom has only been gone a few years, and you're already thinking about another woman. A man like you doesn't deserve to be happy." The room went silent. In the next room, I could hear my 2 grandchildren, Kingsley's kids, 8 and 6, playing with the wooden train set I'd bought them that morning. My name is Wilfred Whitfield. I am 68 years old. I worked 36 years as a mail carrier for the United States Postal Service, delivering letters and packages to the same streets in Allentown until my knees started to give out and my retirement came through. My wife Martha died 4 years ago. Cancer took her slow, then all at once. I paid off this house, this 3-bedroom row home worth every penny of the $210,000 I'd spent my life earning just last year, 4 years after she passed. And now my son was standing in my dining room on Christmas Eve telling me I didn't deserve happiness. "Kingsley," I said quietly, setting down my fork, "sit down. Let's talk about this after dinner." No." Vivica stood up now, her hand gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles went white. "Those 2 rooms upstairs are just gathering dust while my parents are suffering. They're living in a tiny apartment. Dad can barely afford his medication, and you have this whole house to yourself." Bernice Gallagher. Vivica's mother had her hand covering her mouth as if to stop herself from screaming. Delbert stared at his plate, his face pale as snow. "This isn't the time," I started. "When is the time?" Kingsley's voice cracked like a branch snapping. "You won't return my calls. You ignore my texts. I'm trying to have a conversation about what's best for this family, and all you care about is yourself." I looked at him. Really looked at him. This was the boy I taught to ride a bike on this very street. The teenager I drove to college in a borrowed truck. The man I handed $5,000 to when he and Vivica bought their first car together. "This conversation is over," I said. Vivica's face went red. She reached for the soup bowl. It happened fast. She grabbed the ceramic bowl of pumpkin soup still hot from the stove 15 minutes earlier, steam still rising from the surface, and hurled it directly at me with the full force of her arm. The soup hit my left shoulder and neck. Burning, scalding. The liquid soaked through my shirt and onto my skin. I felt my nerves scream before I did. But I didn't scream. The room went completely silent. The soup dripped down my collar, orange and thick, pooling on the chair. The ceramic bowl clattered on the hardwood floor and spun like a top before settling. In the next room, the children stopped playing. The wooden train fell silent on its tracks. Kingsley didn't move to help me. He just stared at me with those cold, dark eyes and said, "You should have just agreed from the start." 35 years ago, I taught my son how to walk. I stood up slowly. The burn throbbed across my shoulder and down my arm like fire spreading through dry brush. But I kept my face calm, neutral. I looked around the table. Vivica breathing hard, her hands shaking. Kingsley with his arms crossed like a guard standing watch. Delbert and Bernice staring at their plates in absolute horror, neither one moving to stop what had just happened. And then I did something that surprised all of them. I smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, calm curve at the corner of my mouth. "Where are you going?" Kingsley asked. His voice was uncertain now, like a child who'd just realized he'd broken something he couldn't fix. "The hospital," I said. I walked to the hallway, pulled my winter coat from the rack, and grabbed my keys from the ceramic bowl on the side table, the bowl Martha painted 20 years ago at a craft class she took on Thursdays. My shoulder was screaming, the burn spreading like poison, but I moved like I had all the time in the world. "Prantidi," I said, using his birth name, the name I gave him, not the one he preferred. "Take care of your family and your guests." He blinked. "Dad, Eddie, don't go anywhere," I said, opening the front door to the cold December night. Snow was falling lightly outside, white and clean. "Someone is going to want to talk to you tonight." I walked out into the winter air, got into my car, a 12-year-old sedan I'd bought used, and grabbed a towel from the trunk. I pressed it against my shoulder. Cold. Wet. Relief mixed with pain. I started the engine. The streets were quiet. Christmas lights blinked red and green on the houses I'd delivered mail to for 36 years. I knew every address by heart, every family by name, every dog that barked when I walked up the steps with a package. I drove toward the hospital with one hand on the wheel and one hand holding the damp towel to my burning skin. The wipers swept snow from the windshield in steady rhythm, and I thought 3 months. For 3 months I had been waiting for this exact moment. 3 months earlier I had gone to see a lawyer. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a man can work his entire life for something, only to watch his own son try to take it away. For 36 years, I carried the mail through rain, snow, and every kind of weather you can imagine for the United States Postal Service. Route 47 in West End, Allentown. Same streets, same houses, same dogs barking at the same gates every morning. I started in 1987 when I was 32 years old. Fresh-faced, strong back, good knees. I delivered letters to young families who grew old on my watch. I watched their children grow up, go to college, come back with families of their own. I knew every address by heart. When I retired last year, my pension came through clean federal employees' retirement system, $2,800 per month. Add Social Security at $1,600 per month. That's $4,400 every month for the rest of my life. Enough to live with dignity. Enough to keep this house running. This house, every brick, every window, every door I paid for with honest work. 3 bedrooms, small backyard, decent neighborhood. The final mortgage payment cleared 11 months ago. I made every payment on time for 30 years. Not once did I miss a deadline or ask for an extension. I remember the day I signed the deed. Martha cried. Happy tears. Martha passed away 4 years ago. Breast cancer. It took her slow at first, then fast at the end. The doctors gave her 2 years. She fought for 3. After she died, the silence in this house took me a long time to get used to. I'd wake up in the morning and reach for her side of the bed. Still cold, still empty. I'd make coffee for 2 out of habit, then pour the second cup down the sink. Kingsley visited every few weeks with the grandkids. He seemed like a good son back then. Brought the children over, let them play in the backyard, asked how I was doing. You doing okay, Dad? He'd ask. I'd say yes. He'd nod and check his phone. I assumed I would live out my years alone in this house. Water the plants Martha loved. Fix the loose board on the back step. Watch television in the evenings with no one to talk to. Then spring came. 8 months before that Christmas Eve. Can you understand what it means to carry mail for 36 years and never miss a single day? To walk the same route until your knees ache and your back screams, but you show up anyway because people depend on you. That's the kind of man I am. Dependable. Steady. Honest. But even steady men get lonely. I met Winifred Blanchard on a park bench in May. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Warm sunbirds singing, children playing on the swings near the fountain. She was sitting alone with a book in her lap, not reading it, just holding it like a shield against the world. I sat down on the other end of the bench. Didn't say anything at first. Just watched the kids play. Beautiful day, she said after a while. It is, I said. We sat in silence for another few minutes. Then she closed her book and looked at me. She was 65 years old, silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, gentle eyes that carried the weight of loss. A former elementary school teacher, I would learn later. 28 years teaching second grade before retirement. I lost my husband 3 years ago, she said. Not sad, just stating a fact. Some days I just need to hear another voice. I lost my wife 4 years ago, I said. She nodded. We understood each other without needing to say more. Over the next few weeks, we met at that same bench. Tuesday afternoons became routine. We talked about small things, weather books, the news. She told me about her late husband, a carpenter, who built their kitchen table with his own hands. I told her about Martha, who painted ceramics and loved mystery novels. Winifred had her own small pension from the school district. She wasn't looking for someone to take care of her. She lived in a modest apartment 3 blocks from the park. She just wanted companionship, someone to share coffee with, someone to talk to when the silence got too heavy. One afternoon in late May, she said something that stayed with me. I'm not looking for someone to take care of me, Wilfred. I just don't want to be alone all the time. And neither do I said. For the first time in 4 years, I felt something like hope. I told Kingsley about her a few weeks later. He came over on a Sunday with Vivica and the kids. We sat in the living room while the grandchildren played with blocks on the floor. I've been spending time with someone, I said. Casual, light. Her name is Winifred. She's a widow. We meet at the park sometimes. Just to talk. Kingsley's face shifted. Not happiness. Not, I'm glad you're not lonely anymore, Dad. Not, that's wonderful. Something cold. His eyes moved past me to the bookshelf Martha had picked out 20 years ago. To the framed photos on the wall. To the windows with the curtains I'd replaced last month. His gaze swept the room like he was taking inventory of assets. That was the moment I first saw it. The look in my son's eyes. Dad, that's great. He said, his voice flat as cardboard. I'm happy for you. But his eyes said something else entirely. Vivica leaned forward, her hands clasped tight in her lap. You're not thinking about remarrying or anything, right? The question hung in the air like smoke. I don't know, Kingsley, I said slowly, watching his face. I haven't thought that far ahead. He nodded, looked at Vivica. She looked back. Some silent conversation passed between them that I wasn't part of. Some calculation I could see forming behind their eyes. I saw it in his eyes right then, the shift from son to something else. Kingsley didn't look at Winifred as the kind woman who wanted to bring a little joy to his father's final years. He looked at her as a threat to what he had already calculated was his. I told myself I was imagining things, that Kingsley was just protective of his father's future, that Vivica was just worried about me rushing into something foolish at my age. I wanted to believe that. 3 months after I met Winifred, Kingsley invited me to a family dinner at his house, and I should have known right then that something was about to shift. It was a Saturday evening in late summer. The air still held the day's heat. I drove to Kingsley's rental house in Emmaus, a modest two-story colonial with a small front yard and a basketball hoop in the driveway. He'd been renting there for 3 years, saving up for a down payment on something permanent. I noticed the rental car parked beside his sedan as soon as I pulled up. A white compact with Enterprise plates. Kingsley met me at the door. "Dad, you remember Vivica's parents, Delbert and Bernice?" I did remember them. I'd met them twice before, once at the wedding, 5 years ago, once at a birthday party for the oldest grandchild. But the people sitting at Kingsley's dining room table looked like different versions of those memories. Delbert Gallagher. Vivica's father at 60 sat at the far end of the table looking like a man who had aged a decade in the 8 months since I'd last seen him. His face was thinner, the skin loose around his jaw. He'd been a construction foreman for 30 years before retirement, broad-shouldered and solid. Now his frame seemed diminished, hollowed out. Bernice, his wife at 58, kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, as if holding herself together through sheer force of will. She'd worked as a bank teller for most of her adult life, always put together and precise. Tonight, her clothes hung loose and her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Good to see you again, Wilfred," Delbert said, standing to shake my hand. His grip was weaker than I remembered. "We're so glad you could join us tonight," Bernice added. The table was set nicely. Vivica had made roasted chicken with vegetables. The grandchildren were at a neighbor's house for the evening. Just the 5 of us adults. We made small talk through the first course. Weather, the children's school plans for fall, my retirement, safe topics that required no real answers. But I could feel something underneath the conversation. A current pulling us towards something nobody wanted to name. Halfway through the main course, Delbert set down his fork. "Wilfred, I want to be honest with you about something," he said. His voice was steady but quiet. "We've had some financial difficulties recently." Bernice's hands tightened in her lap. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. Delbert nodded. "We made a bad investment in a business opportunity about a year ago. A friend convinced us to put money into a commercial property venture. Said we'd double our investment in 2 years. He paused. It was a scam. We lost everything. Everything I asked. "The house," Bernice said softly. "We had to sell it 8 months ago to cover the debt. Barely broke even. Our car was repossessed 3 months back." That rental outside Delbert continued. "That's how we're getting around until we can afford something used. And we're currently living in an extended stay motel off Route 22. Bouncing rent checks week to week, hoping they don't notice." The weight of that confession settled over the table like fog. "The motel isn't..." Bernice's voice cracked slightly. "It's not permanent. Just until we get back on our feet." "I'm so sorry to hear that," I said, genuine sympathy rising in my chest. "That must be incredibly difficult. Have you ever watched someone tell a story and realized halfway through that the story isn't for you, it's about you?" That's when I noticed it. As Delbert finished explaining their situation, Kingsley and Vivica exchanged a quick glance across the table. Just a flicker. A silent conversation passing between them in the space of a breath. Then both of them turned to look at me, not at Delbert and Bernice, at me, waiting, watching my face, studying my reaction like I was a test they needed to pass. "So is there anything we can do to help?" I asked carefully, uncertain what they were expecting me to say. Delbert shook his head. "We're managing, just taking it day by day." Silence fell over the table. But it wasn't the comfortable silence of a family sharing a difficult moment together. It was the silence of people waiting for something to happen, for someone to say the right thing, to offer the right solution. Everyone was looking at me, not Delbert and Bernice looking for sympathy or advice. Not Kingsley and Vivica looking concerned for their family members. They were all looking at me like I was supposed to solve this problem. Vivica cleared her throat. Dad has that big house all to himself now, she said to no one in particular. 3 bedrooms. Just him. Kingsley picked up his water glass, didn't drink, set it back down. It's a shame when people have space they don't need, and other people are struggling to find any space at all. The words hung in the air like smoke. I looked at Delbert. His eyes were fixed on his plate. I looked at Bernice. She was staring at her hands. They weren't part of this conversation. They were props in someone else's play. That's when I understood. This wasn't a family dinner. This was a test. The motel can't be comfortable, I said slowly, choosing my words like stepping stones across a river. Especially long term. It's not, Vivica said quickly. Mom's back is killing her from the mattress. Dad can barely sleep. And they're burning through what little savings they have left just to keep a roof over their heads. Kingsley leaned back in his chair. It would be nice if they had somewhere stable to stay. Somewhere they could catch their breath and rebuild. He wasn't looking at his in-laws when he said it. He was looking directly at me. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. A recognition. A clarity I didn't want but couldn't ignore. This dinner wasn't about the Gallagher's crisis. It was about my house, my 3 empty bedrooms, my assets, my life, and whether I would offer them up without being asked. I see, I said quietly. Vivica smiled. Kingsley nodded. Delbert still wouldn't meet my eyes. When Delbert finished speaking, the whole table went quiet. But nobody was looking at Delbert and Bernice with sympathy. They were all looking at me. Not to see if I was okay. To see what I would say. I didn't say anything that night at dinner, and I didn't offer what they were clearly waiting for. I thanked them for the meal, hugged my grandchildren when they came home from the neighbors, and drove back to my empty house in silence. But over the next 3 months, I started paying very close attention. The first question arrived in September, 2 weeks after that dinner. A phone call on a Tuesday afternoon. Kingsley's voice, casual, friendly. Dad, do you have your will updated? You know, with Mom gone, you should make sure everything is current. I was standing in the kitchen looking out at the backyard, where Martha's rose bushes still bloomed every summer. It's fine, Kingsley, I said. Everything is handled. Yeah, but when was the last time you looked at it? Things change. Tax laws change. You want to make sure your estate is protected. Estate. Not family. Not legacy. Estate. I'll take a look, I said. Sure, good. Let me know if you need help finding an attorney. I know a few people. I'm sure you do, I thought. 2 weeks later, another call. Same subject, different angle. I was just thinking, have you reviewed your estate planning recently? It's important to keep these things current, especially at your age. At my age. Like I was one fall away from incompetence. It's handled, Kingsley. I started keeping track. Not on paper, I'm not foolish enough to leave evidence lying around, but in my head. Every question, every comment, every casual probe disguised as concern. Late September, Vivica stopped by with the grandchildren. We sat in the living room while the kids played with blocks on the carpet. What do you think this place is worth now, Dad? She asked, looking around the room like she was appraising furniture. Just to know you know with property values and all. I haven't thought about it, I said. We saw a house down the street sold for over $200,000 last month. 3 bedrooms like yours. Must be worth something similar. She wasn't wrong, but the way she said it, clinical calculating, made my skin crawl. Probably, I said. She smiled. Just curious. Over the next few weeks, the safety comments started. Phone calls from Kingsley always in the evening when he knew I'd be home alone. Living alone at your age, what if you fall? What if something happens and no one's there? I've been taking care of myself for 68 years, Kingsley. I know, Dad. I'm just saying. It's dangerous. Statistically, elderly people living alone. I'm not a statistic, but he kept at it. different variations on the same theme. How big the house was for one person. How the stairs could be treacherous. How isolated I must feel. How lonely. Every conversation felt like he was building a case. For 36 years, I sorted mail. You learn to recognize patterns, to spot when something doesn't fit. A letter addressed in handwriting that doesn't match the return address. A package sealed more carefully than necessary. You develop instincts for when something is wrong, even if you can't name exactly what it is. I knew what I was looking at. Mid-October, the slip happened. We were talking about Thanksgiving plans. Kingsley wanted to host this year. Vivica's parents would be there. A family gathering. "We should probably talk about what happens if you're no longer here," he said. Silence on the line. "What did you say?" I asked quietly. I just meant, you know. Eventually, we should have a plan. For your estate, for the house, for everything. I'm not planning on going anywhere anytime soon." "Of course not, Dad. I just meant in general. It's good to be prepared." But he'd said when, not if, when. Like it was a timeline he was working toward. Like my death wasn't a distant possibility, but an approaching deadline. I hung up the phone and stood in my kitchen for a long time, watching the sun set through the window. Then late October, the final piece fell into place. I was at the hardware store buying replacement washers for the bathroom sink. Standing in the plumbing aisle, comparing sizes when a man approached me. Mid-50s, friendly face, wearing a Phillies cap. "Wilfred Whitfield, right?" he said. "That's right." "Tom Brennan. I live 2 streets over from your son, Kingsley. Met you at a neighborhood barbecue last summer." I remembered him vaguely. Nice enough fellow. Worked in accounting. "Good to see you again," I said. "You too. Hey, ran into your son at Morrison and Associates last month. Good firm. Estate planning, elder law, that sort of thing. Your family getting things in order." My hand tightened on the package of washers. "Morrison and Associates," I repeated. "Oh yeah, downtown. Saw him in the waiting room when I was there for my own stuff. Didn't get a chance to say hello, but I recognized him." "When was this?" 3-4 weeks ago, maybe early October. We made small talk for another minute, then parted ways. I paid for my washers and drove home with my mind racing. Why would Kingsley need an elder law attorney? I made discreet inquiries. Called an old friend who worked in legal administration. Asked casual questions. Mentioned the firm name. Morrison and Associates. They specialize in conservatorships, competency declarations, guardianship cases, that sort of thing. Conservatorships? Competency declarations? The words landed like stones in water. I did my own research that evening. Sat at my computer, the one Kingsley thought I barely knew how to use, and looked up Pennsylvania law on declaring an elderly parent mentally incompetent. The process for obtaining conservatorship. The legal steps required to take control of someone's estate against their will. It was all there. Laid out in clinical legal language. A roadmap for stealing someone's autonomy while claiming it was for their own protection. That was the moment I stopped being his father and became his problem. I sat in my living room that October evening and thought about 36 years of delivering mail. You learn to recognize when an envelope is sealed more carefully than usual, when an address is written with too much deliberation, when someone is sending something they don't want anyone else to see. I knew what I was looking at. The questions about my will, the inquiries about the house value, the safety concerns, the slip about when instead of if, the visit to an elder law attorney. Kingsley wasn't worried about my well-being. He was building a case to declare me incompetent, take control of my assets, and put his in-laws in my house while I was still breathing. The betrayal was complete. The question was what I was going to do about it. I made the call Monday morning, got an appointment for Thursday afternoon. 3 days later, I sat across from attorney Alaric Riddle in a small office in Center City, Allentown, and I told him everything. Alaric Riddle was 38 years old, sharp-eyed and precise, specializing in Pennsylvania estate planning and family law. His office was small but orderly law books, arranged by subject on wooden shelves, framed degrees on the wall, a desk clear of clutter, except for a legal pad and a pen. He listened to my story without interrupting once. I started with meeting Winifred, moved to the family dinner with the Gallaghers, explained the pattern of questions, the will, the house value, the safety concerns, told him about the slip when you're no longer here, instead of if. Finished with what I'd learned about Kingsley consulting an elder law firm about declaring a parent mentally incompetent. When I finished, Alaric set down his pen and looked at me directly. "You're not overreacting," he said. "Those 4 words hit me harder than I expected. For weeks I'd been wondering if I was seeing threats where there were none, if grief and loneliness had made me paranoid, if a father was supposed to give his son more benefit of the doubt. Let me ask you something," Alaric continued. "Do you think this will stay verbal?" I thought about Kingsley's eyes at that family dinner, the cold calculation, the way he and Vivica exchanged glances like business partners closing a deal. "No," I said, "I don't." Alaric nodded. "Then we need to prepare for what comes next. I need to know what my options are if this gets worse." "Here's the reality," Alaric said, leaning forward slightly. "Pennsylvania law makes a distinction that matters. If your son is pressuring you, verbally calling you selfish, manipulating you emotionally, even making threats, the law can't do much. It's ugly, but it's not illegal. So I have no protection. He's not from words. But if he or anyone acting with him commits a physical act, assault, battery, theft, destruction of property, even something small that changes everything. The moment someone crosses from verbal to physical, we have tools. So I wait for it to get worse before I can protect myself." Alaric's expression was steady. "You prepare now so that when it happens, you're not caught off guard. You build the foundation so that when the moment comes, you know exactly what to do." "What foundation?" He pulled a fresh legal pad toward him and started writing. "First, we update your will immediately. Make your intentions crystal clear. Document that you are of sound mind acting of your own free will without coercion." I nodded. "Second, we establish a revocable living trust for your grandchildren. Your house, your savings, whatever you want protected, goes into the trust. You maintain full control while you're alive. You can change it, dissolve it, do whatever you want. But the moment it's in that trust, your son can't touch it. It's not part of your estate. It's not his." For the first time in months, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. "Shakti, the grandchildren are the beneficiaries," Alaric continued. "The trust is managed by a trustee until they reach a certain age, say 25. That way, even if something happens to you, even if someone tries to claim incompetence or exert influence, the assets are legally protected. And you'd be the trustee if you want. Or we can appoint someone else you trust. The important thing is, it's not Kingsley, not Vivica, not anyone with a conflict of interest." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. I said, "I want you as trustee." He made a note. "Third," Alaric said, and his voice changed slightly, became more deliberate. "And this is the most important part. If it happens, if there is a physical incident of any kind, you must go to the hospital before doing anything else. The hospital before you call the police, before you call me, before you do anything. If someone lays a hand on you, if someone throws something at you, if someone causes you physical harm in any way, you go immediately to the emergency room and you get it documented. You tell the doctors exactly what happened. You let them photograph any injuries. You let them write it down in your medical record." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. "A medical record created in that moment in that window right after the incident is the single most powerful piece of evidence in any assault or battery case. It's contemporaneous. It's unbiased. It's created by medical professionals with no stake in your family drama. Nobody can claim you fabricated it later or exaggerated for sympathy. That documentation is the foundation of everything that comes after criminal charges, protective orders, all of it. I understood. Hospital first. I repeated. Hospital first. He confirmed. Then you call the police from the hospital. Then you call me, in that order. Phase 1. It sounded so calm, so clinical. Like we were planning a construction project instead of preparing for my own son to attack me. Oh, how long will this take? I asked. The will, the trust. I can have the documents ready in 2 weeks. We'll meet, review everything, make any changes you want, then execute them properly. Witnessed, notarized, legally airtight. 2 weeks, mid-November, 3 months before Christmas. And after that, Alaric set down his pen and looked at me with something that might have been sympathy or might have been experience. After that, you wait. You continue your life. You don't tell Kingsley what you've done. You don't give him any indication that you're prepared. And when he makes his move, because he will make his move, you follow the protocol. Hospital first. We'll call this Phase 1, he added. Documentation, legal positioning evidence. Setting the foundation so that when the time comes, we're ready for Phase 2. I didn't ask what Phase 2 was. I already knew. Phase 2 was justice. I paid Alaric a retainer. We shook hands. He walked me to the door of his office. Before I left, Alaric said something I won't forget. When it happens, and I say when not, if you must go to the hospital before doing anything else. A medical record created in that exact window is the one thing nobody can contest later. Remember that. I nodded. I walked out into the October afternoon. The air was crisp, leaves falling from the trees lining the street. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel. I didn't know Christmas Eve was only 3 months away. 2 weeks later, the documents were signed. Will updated. Trust established. Alaric's card in my wallet. Then I waited. The call came on a Tuesday evening in early December, 3 weeks before Christmas, while I was reading the newspaper with a bowl of soup balanced on my lap. Dad, hey. Kingsley's voice was bright. Too bright. I was thinking, why don't we do Christmas Eve at your place this year? You know, bigger space, cozier for everyone. The kids love your backyard. I recognized that tone immediately. It was the same voice he used at 17, asking to borrow money for car repairs that turned out to be concert tickets. The same cheerful inflection at 23, needing a loan for emergency dental work that became a weekend in Atlantic City. The tone that meant he wanted something and thought I was too naive to notice. Sure, Kingsley, I said, keeping my voice even. I'll cook. A pause on the other end. Like he'd been braced for resistance. Oh, great. That's perfect, Dad. I'll let everyone know. Vivica's parents, too, if that's okay. Of course, I said. The more the merrier. Awesome. Really appreciate it, Dad. This'll be nice. Like old times. Like old times. When his mother was still alive. When he was still my son. Looking forward to it, I said. We hung up. I set the phone down and looked around my living room. The same furniture Martha picked out. The same photographs on the wall. The same house I'd paid for with honest work. And I thought he's going to try something. I just didn't know what yet. I hung up and looked over at the old USPS bag hanging near the coat rack. 36 years I'd delivered mail to the right address right on time. Rain, snow, heat, nothing stopped me. You learn to spot when something's off, a package that's too light, an address that doesn't match a return address deliberately smudged. Kingsley thought I couldn't read him anymore. He was wrong. I spent the next week preparing like you'd prepare for a storm you know is coming. Cleaned the house, made sure everything was in order, checked that Alaric's card was in my wallet, rehearsed the protocol, hospital first, police second, attorney third, phase 1 ready to activate. But there was something I didn't know. Something happening behind the scenes that I wouldn't learn until much later, after the soup and the hospital and everything that came after. 2 weeks before Christmas, right when Kingsley called me about hosting dinner, he went to see Delbert and Bernice Gallagher at that extended stay motel off Route 22. I only learned about this later, from their own mouths. But I need to tell you now so you understand the full scope of what my son had planned. Kingsley sat in their cramped motel room and told them something that changed everything. I talked to my dad. He said, his voice full of warmth and concern. I explained your situation, and he said you could stay in the 2 upstairs bedrooms at his house, just temporarily until you get back on your feet. Bernice's eyes filled with tears. Really? Delbert asked. Wilfred said that. He did, Kingsley lied. He feels terrible about what you've been through. He has all that space and he's alone most of the time anyway. He wants to help. Oh, Kingsley, Bernice said, her voice breaking. Thank you. We've been so worried. I know, Kingsley said, putting his hand over hers. That's why I talked to him. Family helps family, right? Delbert shook Kingsley's hand, his grip firm with gratitude. When can we move in? Bernice asked. Soon, Kingsley said. We'll make it official at Christmas dinner. Everyone will be there. It'll be easier that way. My dad's a little shy about this kind of thing, doesn't like making a big deal out of being generous. So we'll bring it up during dinner, he'll confirm it, and then you can move in the next day. Simple. They believed him completely. Why wouldn't they? He was their son-in-law. He'd been married to their daughter for 5 years. He was the father of their grandchildren. He'd helped them when their car was repossessed. He was trustworthy. Vivica was there too, sitting beside him. She nodded along her face, sympathetic. It's going to be fine, she said. You'll see. Christmas dinner we'll celebrate, and then you'll have a real home again. Delbert and Bernice looked at each other with something like hope. They had no idea they were being used as leverage. They had no idea that my agreement was a fabrication. They had no idea that Kingsley was setting them up as witnesses to what he would frame as my sudden, cruel reversal proof of my selfishness and possible mental decline. The plan was elegant in its cruelty. Bring the Gallaghers to Christmas dinner believing I'd already agreed to house them. Have Kingsley remind me of my promise in front of everyone. If I denied it, I'd look like a liar or someone whose memory was failing. If I refused to help them, I'd look heartless in front of my own grandchildren. Either way, he'd use my response as evidence that I was either incompetent or unfit. And if I did agree under pressure, which is what he was counting on, then the Gallaghers would move in. And once they were there, Kingsley would have what he wanted: control, proximity, influence, witnesses, who would testify he was the caring son looking after his father. The first step toward conservatorship. But I didn't know any of this yet. Not then. All I knew was that Kingsley had asked to host Christmas at my house, and I'd said yes. I only learned about this later from the Gallaghers themselves after everything had already happened. And when I heard it, I understood something that made the betrayal even deeper on that Christmas night. I wasn't the only victim my son had lined up. But that night, sitting in front of my house with Alaric's card in my wallet and the protocol memorized, I didn't yet understand the full picture. I just knew I was ready. Christmas Eve morning came in clear and cold, and I woke up at 6 a.m. to start cooking. I moved through my kitchen with deliberate care, the way you move when you know every motion matters. Pumpkin soup, first onions sautéed in butter until translucent canned pumpkin stirred in with cream and nutmeg, salt, and pepper to taste. I let it simmer on low heat, the steam rising and fogging the kitchen window. Roasted chicken next. I rubbed it with olive oil, rosemary, thyme, garlic. Slid it into the oven at 10 a.m., set the timer, watched the temperature gauge. Apple pie while the chicken cooked. Peeled apples, sliced them thin, tossed them with cinnamon and sugar. Rolled out the crust Martha taught me to make 20 years ago, cold butter ice water, work it as little as possible. Crimped the edges, brushed the top with egg wash. By 2 p.m., the house smelled like every Christmas we'd ever had. I went upstairs and opened the china cabinet in the hallway. Martha's good dishes sat on the top shelf, wrapped in tissue paper I'd placed there myself after she died. White plates with a delicate blue rim around the edge. She'd only used them for holidays and special occasions. "Too nice for every day," she used to say. I carried them down carefully, 6 plates, and washed each one by hand, even though they were already clean. Dried them with a soft towel. Arranged them around the dining room table. White tablecloth, cloth napkins, the silver candlesticks Martha's mother gave us as a wedding present. 6 tall white candles. I looked at Martha's china plates and thought, this is the last time these will see a family dinner in this house. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was setting the table for the most important performance of my life using dishes meant to celebrate family love tradition. And I absolutely knew, that before the night was over, at least one of those plates would probably be broken. Maybe all of them, but Martha would have wanted the house to look nice. Even for this, I checked the soup, still simmering, hot. It had to be hot enough. 4 p.m. I showered, shaved, put on clean clothes. A button-down shirt, khaki pants, the cardigan Martha bought me 2 Christmases before she died. I looked in the mirror and saw a 68-year-old man who'd worked his entire life for a house and a family and a sense of dignity. Tonight, I'd find out what all of that was worth. 5 p.m., exactly, headlights in the driveway. I opened the door. Kingsley and Vivica stood on the front step with my 2 grandchildren bundled in winter coats, 8 years old, and 6, a boy and a girl, with their mother's dark hair and their grandfather's eyes. "It's my Merry Christmas, Dad." Kingsley's voice was cheerful, his smile wide. "House looks beautiful." "Merry Christmas," I said. I hugged the grandchildren, felt their small arms wrap around my waist. "Grandpa, did you make pie?" the youngest asked. "Apple pie," I said. "Your favorite." They ran inside, shedding coats and shoes, heading straight for the Christmas tree in the living room, where I'd placed a few wrapped presents earlier that morning. Small things. Books. Toys. Gifts that would be opened in about 2 hours, right before everything fell apart. Kingsley and Vivica followed them in. She kissed my cheek, her perfume sharp and floral. "Everything smells amazing," she said. 20 minutes later, the rental car pulled up. Delbert and Bernice Gallagher. I watched them walk up the front path. Delbert in a sport coat that hung loose on his frame. Bernice in a dark blue dress, her hair carefully styled, holding a bottle of wine wrapped in red tissue paper. They looked nervous, not the comfortable nervousness of guests arriving at a dinner party. Something else. Something heavier. Like people carrying a secret they're waiting for permission to reveal. "Wilfred." Bernice said, her voice warm but oddly emphasized. "Thank you so much for having us. Everything is just lovely." She hugged me longer than normal. Delbert shook my hand, his grip firm, his eyes searching my face like he was looking for confirmation of something. I smiled. "Glad you could make it. Come in, come in. It's cold out there." They stepped inside. Vivica took their coats. Kingsley poured drinks, wine for the adults, juice for the kids. We stood in the living room, making small talk about the weather, the traffic, the decorations on the tree. Surface conversation. The kind that fills space without saying anything real. "Let's eat before everything gets cold," I said finally. We moved to the dining room. The table looked perfect. Candles lit, dishes arranged, everything in its place. I watched them all settle around the table, smiling, talking, passing dishes. Kingsley at my right. Vivica beside him. Delbert and Bernice across from them. The two grandchildren at the small table by the window with their own plates and cups, close enough to be part of things, but far enough to have their own space. It looked like a normal family. It looked like Christmas. Kingsley raised his wine glass. "A toast," he said, "to family, to being together, to new beginnings." The last phrase hung in the air. Delbert and Bernice glanced at each other. Vivica smiled. I lifted my glass. "To family," I said. We drank. I served the soup, ladling it into bowls, the steam rising. Passed the basket of bread. Brought out the chicken on a platter, golden brown and glistening. Conversation flowed. The kids talked about school. Vivica mentioned a new recipe she'd tried. Delbert asked about the weather forecast for next week. All of it normal, all of it ordinary. But I could feel it underneath the tension. The waiting, the unspoken script we were all following toward. The moment when someone would say the thing we were all thinking about, but nobody had named yet. During that dinner, I sat at the head of the table and looked around my son, my daughter-in-law, the in-laws, my two grandchildren, at the small table by the window. It looked like a normal family. It looked like Christmas. Only I knew this was the last time we would all sit here like this. 20 minutes into dinner, the conversation was exactly what you'd expect, light, pleasant, safe. The chicken was good. The soup was perfect. Someone complimented the pie sitting on the counter. Then Kingsley shifted. We were halfway through the meal when Kingsley set down his fork and looked at me with that particular smile I had learned to recognize, the one that didn't reach his eyes, the one that meant he was about to say something designed to cut. "So, Dad," he said, his voice casual, conversational, "are you still seeing that friend of yours? What was her name again?" The table quieted slightly. Not a full stop, but a hesitation. Spoons paused mid-air. Glasses set down a little too carefully. I looked at him across the table. His expression was innocent, curious, like he was asking about the weather. "Her name is Winifred," I said evenly. "And yes." Vivica tilted her head, her smile tight. "Winifred. That's right. How long have you two been spending time together?" "Since spring," I said. Delbert shifted in his seat. Bernice looked down at her soup. Kingsley leaned back in his chair, still smiling. "Mom's only been gone 4 years. That seems fast. Don't you think?" There it was, the weapon. He wasn't asking about Winifred because he cared about my happiness or wanted to know if I was lonely. He was bringing her up in front of Vivica's parents to paint a picture, a widower who'd moved on too quickly, who was already thinking about replacement instead of honoring his late wife's memory, who was selfish enough to pursue his own comfort instead of focusing on family obligations. It was character assassination disguised as concern. I think," I said slowly, keeping my voice calm, "that grief doesn't follow a schedule, and I think Martha would want me to be happy." Would she?" Vivica asked. "Or would she want you to think about the family you still have, the people who actually need you?" The grandchildren were still at their table by the window, oblivious, playing with their food and whispering to each other about something only children find fascinating. I looked at Vivica. "I think about my family every day. Do you?" Kingsley's voice had an edge, now sharp beneath the surface pleasantness. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're thinking about yourself." I had known this moment was coming for 3 months. Every word he said I had already prepared for. Every angle, every manipulation, every tactical move designed to make me look unreasonable or selfish or incompetent, I'd rehearsed my responses in my head 100 times. So I did the one thing he didn't expect. I said nothing. I picked up my spoon and continued eating my soup. The silence stretched. Uncomfortable, heavy. Delbert cleared his throat. "This chicken is excellent, Wilfred. Really wonderful." "Thank you," I said. Vivica looked at Kingsley. He looked back at her. Some silent signal passed between them, and I knew we were moving to the next phase. She set her spoon down deliberately, the clink of metal on china loud in the quiet room. "Dad," she said, her voice taking on a tone of practiced reasonableness. "This house is huge. You're here all by yourself. My parents are struggling, living in a motel, barely making rent. Those 2 rooms upstairs are just empty. Just sitting there." Here it was, the demand. I set down my own spoon and looked at her directly. "Viveka, this is my home. It's not a solution to someone else's housing situation. But you have the space." "The answer is no." Her face flushed. "We're not asking you to give them the house. Just let them stay temporarily. A few months. Until they can get back on their feet. It's the least you could do." "The least I could do," I repeated slowly. "For people I met twice before tonight." "Okay, Chin." Kingsley said, his voice hard now. "Viveka's parents are family. Or does that not matter to you anymore?" I looked at Delbert and Bernice. They were staring at their plates, their faces pale, their hands gripping their forks like anchors. They hadn't known this was coming. Not like this. "I'm sorry about your situation," I said to them directly, gently. "I truly am. But my answer is no." "Daddy Kundin," Kingsley started. No," I said again, firmer this time. "This is my house. I worked 36 years to pay for it. It is mine. And what I choose to do with it is my decision. Not yours." Bernice's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it. Then opened it again. But Kingsley said, she started, her voice confused and small. Viveka's head snapped toward her eyes, sharp. "Mom!" Bernice stopped mid-sentence, her face crumbling with the realization that she'd said something wrong. But I'd heard it, and now I understood. Kingsley had told them I'd already agreed. That was why they'd come tonight with that odd nervousness, that uncomfortable gratitude. They thought this dinner was a formality, a public confirmation of an arrangement already made. They thought the housing offer was already settled, and we were just making it official in front of everyone. They had no idea they'd been lied to. No idea they were pawns in a scheme to trap me into compliance through public pressure and social obligation. "What did Kingsley say?" I asked quietly, looking at Bernice. She looked at her daughter, then at Kingsley, then back down at her plate. "Nothing," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I misspoke." The table went completely silent. No one ate. No one drank. The candles flickered. In the next room, one of the grandchildren laughed at something, the sound bright and innocent and completely out of place. Kingsley's jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on me with something cold and calculating. Viveka's hands were clenched in her lap. Delbert and Bernice stared down at their plates, their faces pale with confusion and dawning realization. And Kingsley, my son, slowly put down his fork with a movement I recognized instantly. He placed his napkin beside his plate. He pushed back his chair slightly. He was about to stand up. He stood. Kingsley stood up so fast, his chair scraped hard against the hardwood floor, and he pointed his finger at me the way I used to point at him when he was 16 and came home past curfew. But I wasn't the one who'd broken the rules this time. "You are so selfish, Dad." His voice echoed off the walls. Loud, deliberate. Designed to fill the room and leave no space for response. "Mom has only been gone a few years, and you're already thinking about another woman. A man like you doesn't deserve to be happy." The words landed like stones thrown through glass. In the next room, the grandchildren stopped playing. The wooden train went silent on its tracks. I could hear them breathing, listening, trying to understand why Daddy was yelling at Grandpa. Delbert pushed his chair back from the table. Bernice's hand covered her mouth. Viveka stood up beside her husband, her face flushed, her voice rising to match his. "Those rooms are empty while my parents sleep in a motel," she shouted. "You won't even help family. You sit here in this big house all alone and you won't even lower your voice, I said quietly. There are children in this house. Don't tell me to lower my voice. Kingsley's face was red now, veins visible in his neck. You're the one who... This conversation is over, I said. I set my napkin beside my plate, folded it once, placed it carefully on the table. It's not over, Kingsley said. It's not over until you... It is over. I repeated, my voice still calm, still level. And I would like you to take your family and leave my home. Silence. Delbert stood up, pulling Bernice with him. We should go, he said quietly. This isn't... Sit down, Vivica snapped at him. Then she turned back to me, her eyes bright with fury. You think you can just... That's when she grabbed the soup bowl. I saw it happen. Saw her hand reach across the table. Saw her fingers wrap around the ceramic. Saw her lift it, and I knew. This was it. This was the moment Alaric had predicted. The moment I'd been preparing for. The moment when verbal manipulation crossed into physical action and the law finally had something it could prosecute. She threw the bowl. The soup hit me left shoulder neck collar, scalding hot orange and thick, soaking through my shirt and onto my skin. The pain was immediate, sharp, spreading like fire across my shoulder blade and down my arm. I didn't scream. The bowl clattered to the floor, spinning, settling. The grandchildren ran out from the next room, their faces pale with fear. The oldest grabbed his sister's hand and pulled her back away from the adults, away from whatever this was. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The soup dripped down my shirt, pooling on the chair. My skin screamed beneath the fabric. First-degree burns at minimum, second-degree likely. I could feel the blistering starting already. 35 years ago, I taught my son how to walk. Held his hands every morning when he was learning, guided his feet step by step across the living room carpet until he could do it on his own. I was so proud the day he took his first independent steps. I called Martha at work to tell her. We celebrated that night with ice cream. Now that same son stood across the table from me watching his wife assault his father, and his face showed no regret, only cold satisfaction. You should have just agreed from the start, he said. His voice was calm, matter of fact, like he was commenting on the weather or the score of a football game. I looked around the table, Vivica breathing hard, her hands still trembling. Delbert and Bernice standing frozen near their chairs, their faces stricken with horror. The grandchildren huddled in the doorway, crying softly. Kingsley with his arms crossed, waiting for me to respond. And I did something none of them expected. I smiled. Not a big smile, not triumphant or mocking. Just a small, calm curve at the corner of my mouth, because I knew something they didn't. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. Where are you going? Kingsley asked, his voice changing, uncertainty creeping in as I stood up slowly. The burn throbbed across my shoulder, but I moved like I had all the time in the world. Steady, deliberate. I walked to the hallway without answering. My coat hung on the rack by the door. My keys sat in the ceramic bowl Martha had painted. I pulled the coat on carefully over my injured shoulder, grabbed a clean dish towel from the kitchen drawer, and pressed it against the burn. Cold fabric on screaming skin. Dad! Where are you going? Kingsley called again, his voice louder now, cracking slightly. Are you okay? I turned to look at him one last time. He stood in the dining room doorway, backlit by the candles still burning on the table, his expression somewhere between defiance and dawning fear. The hospital, I said. I opened the front door. Cold December air rushed in, sharp and clean. Snow was falling lightly, white flakes catching the porch light. Dad. And Kingsley, I said, pausing at the threshold, don't go anywhere. Someone is going to want to talk to you tonight. I walked out into the snow. Behind me, I heard Vivica's voice, high and tight. What does he mean, who's coming? I didn't turn around. I walked to my car, opened the door, sat down in the driver's seat. My shoulder was on fire. The towel was already soaked through. I reached into the glove compartment, found a bottle of water, poured some on a fresh section of the towel, pressed it against the burn. The cold helped. A little. I started the engine. Through the living room window, I could see them all standing there watching me. Kingsley's silhouette. Vivica beside him. The in-laws somewhere in the background. I put the car in reverse, backed out of the driveway, and drove away from the house I'd spent 36 years paying for. Christmas lights blinked on the houses I passed. Red and green and white, cheerful and warm, celebrating a holiday that had just turned into evidence. Phase 1 was complete. Phase 1 meant evidence. Documentation. A medical record created in the exact window when the crime occurred, before anyone could claim I'd exaggerated or fabricated the story later. Phase 1 meant I had to drive. The drive to Lehigh Valley Hospital took 11 minutes, and I remember every single one of them clearly. I pulled out of my neighborhood onto Hamilton Street, one hand on the wheel, the other pressing the damp dish towel against my left shoulder and neck. The fabric was already warm from my skin losing its cooling effect. The burn throbbed underneath, sharp, constant, like someone holding a hot iron against me and refusing to let go. I didn't scream in the house. I didn't scream in the car either. Snow fell lightly on the windshield. White flakes catching in the headlights and melting as soon as they touched the glass. Christmas lights blurred past on either side. Houses decorated with wreaths and reindeer and inflatable Santa's families, inside celebrating a holiday I'd just left behind in pieces. My phone lit up on the passenger seat. Kingsley's name. Photo of him from 5 years ago smiling at his wedding, back when I still thought I knew who my son was. The phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times, then stopped. I kept driving. 30 seconds later, it lit up again. Same name, same photo. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I didn't pick up. Hospital first? Medical record first? Everything else comes after. That's what Alaric had said. Those were my instructions. And after 36 years, carrying mail in rain and snow and heat, I knew how to follow instructions. The phone kept buzzing. Kingsley's name, Kingsley's name, Kingsley's name. I watched it light up and go dark, light up and go dark over and over like a heartbeat. He was scared. Good. He should be. The burn pulled tight across my shoulder every time I moved the steering wheel. First degree for sure. Second degree likely. I could feel the skin blistering under my shirt, the heat radiating outward like I was carrying a coal against my body. But pain was just pain. Pain was temporary. Evidence was permanent. I turned left onto Cedar Crest Boulevard. The hospital was 3 miles ahead. Traffic was light. Most people were home with their families tonight, eating dinner, opening presents, doing all the things normal families do on Christmas Eve. My family had just committed assault and battery. The difference mattered. Red light at the intersection of Butler Street. I stopped, shifted the towel slightly to cover a spot that was screaming louder than the rest, and reached for my phone with my right hand. For 3 months I had been waiting for this exact moment. I opened my messages. Found Alaric's name. Typed 3 words with deliberate precision, my thumb moving carefully across the screen. Phase 1 complete. I read it twice to make sure there were no typos. Then I hit send. The message showed, delivered immediately. 3 dots appeared as Alaric started typing a response. The light turned green. I set the phone down and drove. Alaric would know exactly what that meant. He'd know I was hurt. He'd know I was heading to the hospital. He'd know that the plan we'd discussed in his office in October, the plan that seemed almost theoretical then, like preparing for a storm that might never come, had just become real. 3 months of preparation. 3 words to activate it. My phone lit up again. Not Kingsley this time. Alaric. The message preview showed on the screen, ER first. Full statement to doctor. Photos. Do not call police yourself, let hospital notify if they offer. I'm available 24/7. You did the right thing. I didn't read the whole message while driving. I'd read it later in the parking lot before I walked in. But I already knew what it said. We'd rehearsed this. I knew my role. Get treated. Tell the truth. Let the medical professionals document everything. Let the system do what the system does when someone reports a violent crime. Don't be emotional. Don't exaggerate, just state facts. My daughter-in-law threw a bowl of hot soup at me during Christmas dinner. It burned my shoulder and neck. I left immediately and drove here. Simple, factual, unassailable. Another red light. Another pause. Another wave of pain as I shifted position. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My face was calm. Pale, maybe. Tired, definitely. But calm. 68 years old. Retired mail carrier, widower, father, grandfather. And as of 11 minutes ago, victim of domestic assault. The light changed. I drove. Lehigh Valley Hospital emerged on my right, a sprawl of brick buildings and glass windows lit against the dark December sky. Emergency entrance marked with blue signs and bright lights. I signaled, turned into the parking lot, found a spot near the door. I shifted the car into park and sat there for a moment, engine still running, heat blowing from the vents. My phone buzzed again. Kingsley. I glanced at it, saw his name, let it go to voicemail. He'd called 14 times. 14 attempts to explain, to minimize, to convince me not to do exactly what I was about to do. But it was too late for that. It had been too late since the moment Vivica's hand wrapped around that soup bowl. 36 years delivering mail taught me one thing: always follow the protocol. Letters go in mailboxes. Packages get signed for. Registered mail requires identification. You don't skip steps. You don't take shortcuts. You do it right every single time, because that's how the system works. Tonight, the protocol was simple. Hospital first. Medical documentation. Police report. Attorney consultation. Everything in order. Everything by the book. Phase 1. I turned off the engine, pulled the key from the ignition, grabbed my phone and my wallet, pressed the towel one more time against the burn, still hot, still throbbing, still evidence. I got out of the car. The cold December air hit my face. Snow fell in lazy spirals under the parking lot lights. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang Christmas Eve service starting at 7 p.m. I walked toward the emergency room entrance, each step deliberate, the automatic doors sliding open as I approached. I pulled into the emergency room parking lot at Lehigh Valley Hospital. Outside, a light snow was falling on Christmas Eve. Inside, I knew that tonight was the night everything officially began. I walked through the automatic doors and into the bright fluorescent light of the emergency room. I walked into the emergency room at Lehigh Valley Hospital with a dish towel still pressed against my burning shoulder, the fabric soaked through, by then my shirt underneath stuck to blistering skin. Grace Hartley, the ER nurse at the front desk, took one look at me and had me back in a treatment room within 10 minutes. "Burn?" she asked, already pulling up a form on her computer. "Oh, yes," and I said. "How did it happen?" "Hot liquid," I said. "Thrown at me." Her typing paused for just a fraction of a second, then continued. "Someone will be right with you," she said. The treatment room was small, sterile, bright. An examination table covered in white paper, a blood pressure cuff hanging on the wall, the smell of antiseptic and something chemical I couldn't name. I sat down carefully, the burn pulling tight across my shoulder every time I moved. 5 minutes later, Dr. Eleanor Brennan walked in, a calm woman in her 40s, with steady hands and wire-rimmed glasses. She examined the burns without flinching, her face professional and focused. "First and second-degree thermal burns," she said, peeling back the towel gently. "Left shoulder and neck, approximately 4 inches across. This is going to need careful treatment." She worked methodically, cleaning the area with saline solution that stung worse than the original burn. I didn't make a sound. "How did this happen, Mr. Whitfield?" she asked. I told her the truth. Complete. Factual. No embellishment. My daughter-in-law threw a bowl of hot soup at me during an argument at dinner. Dr. Brennan's expression didn't change much. She kept working, kept cleaning, kept documenting. Was this intentional? Yes, I said. Are there any other injuries? No. She nodded, made a note on her tablet. Mr. Whitfield hospital policy requires me to notify law enforcement when a patient comes in with an injury caused by another person. An officer will want to speak with you before you leave tonight. Is that acceptable? Yes, I said, and there it was. The mechanism Alaric had described. The mandatory reporting law that meant I didn't have to press charges or make a decision about whether to involve the state. The state was already involved the moment I walked through those doors with a burn caused by another person's deliberate action. No family pressure could undo it. No phone call from Kingsley could stop it. The machinery had started, and it would run its course according to protocol. Do you feel safe at home, Mr. Whitfield? Dr. Brennan asked. I live alone, I said. I feel perfectly safe. She made another note. This will take about 20 minutes to dress properly, she said. While she worked, I thought about Alaric's words from that October afternoon in his office. A medical record created in that exact window is the one thing nobody can contest later. He'd been right. Dr. Brennan's documentation was thorough, precise, unassailable. Burn pattern, location, depth, mechanism of injury. Photographs taken from 3 angles. Every detail recorded in a medical file that would exist forever, time-stamped, professionally witnessed, created within an hour of the incident. Not a story I told later. Not a memory that could be questioned or doubted. Not something I could be accused of exaggerating after the fact. Evidence, pure and permanent. She finished wrapping the bandage, gave me instructions for care, and follow-up handed me a prescription for pain medication and antibiotic cream. Someone from hospital administration will be in touch about the police report, she said. The officer should be here within the hour. Thank you, I said. She left. I sat in the treatment room alone, the burn throbbing dully now beneath clean white gauze. Before I tell you what the officer asked me, are you still with me? Comment A, if you think this will escalate further, or B, if you think Kingsley will back down now. Add one reason why. Please note some details ahead are adapted for storytelling impact, though the core lesson remains. This is where the system truly engages. 45 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Officer Marcus Flynn walked in, a broad-shouldered man in his 30s, with a notepad already in hand, and a patient, unhurried way of asking questions that told me he'd done this many times before. "I'm Mr. Whitfield," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Officer Flynn. I understand you were assaulted this evening." "Yes," I said. He pulled up a chair, opened his notepad, clicked his pen. "Walk me through exactly what happened tonight, Mr. Whitfield. Start from the beginning." I did. I told him about the Christmas dinner, the argument about the house, the demand to let the in-laws move into my upstairs bedrooms, my refusal, Kingsley's accusation, Vivica's escalation. The moment she grabbed the soup bowl and threw it. Officer Flynn wrote steadily, asking clarifying questions, noting times and locations and names. "Did the throw look intentional?" he asked. "Or could it have been an accident, a slip, while gesturing something like that?" "She picked the bowl up, aimed, and threw it," I said. "Not an accident. Deliberate." He made a note. "Were there witnesses?" 5 adults, 2 children in the next room. He wrote down their names as I recited them: Kingsley Whitfield, Vivica Whitfield, Delbert Gallagher, Bernice Gallagher. "And where did this occur?" I gave him my address. "Are any of the witnesses still at that location?" "I don't know," I said. "I left immediately after the incident." Officer Flynn nodded, finished writing, looked up at me. "Mr. Whitfield, based on what you've told me and the medical documentation from Dr. Brennan, I'm going to file this as simple assault under Pennsylvania Statute 18 PACS Section 2701. That's a second-degree misdemeanor. Officers will be dispatched to interview the witnesses you've named. The district attorney's office will review the case and determine whether to file charges. Do you understand? Yes, I said. The machinery of justice had started moving, and there was no stopping it now. Do you have any questions for me? Officer Flynn asked. No, I said. He handed me his card. If you think of anything else, or if you feel unsafe at any point, call me directly. That number works 24 hours. Thank you, officer. He paused at the door. Merry Christmas, sir, he said. I looked out the hospital window at the snow falling heavier now, white and silent against the dark December sky. Merry Christmas, I replied. It was the strangest Christmas of my life. But it was also the first Christmas in years where I felt like I was standing firmly on my own 2 feet. I left the hospital around 9 p.m., drove home to my empty house, took the pain medication Dr. Brennan prescribed, and went to bed. I wasn't there that night when the police arrived at Kingsley's house, but I heard about it later from the Gallaghers themselves and from the police report that followed. What happened went like this. Officer Raymond Daniels, the lead officer dispatched to interview the witnesses at Kingsley's home, arrived with his partner around 9:30 p.m. on Christmas night. They rang the doorbell. But before that, before the doorbell, before the knock, before the officers stepped onto the porch, Kingsley had already gathered everyone in his living room. Vivica sat on the couch, her face pale and drawn. Delbert and Bernice stood near the window, still in their dinner clothes, looking exhausted and confused. The 2 grandchildren had been sent upstairs to bed an hour earlier. Kingsley stood in the center of the room and spoke in the voice I recognized from every time he'd been caught doing something wrong as a teenager, urgent, insistent, rehearsed. When the police asked, he said, "You say it was an accident. The bowl slipped. That's it. Simple." Delbert looked at him. Kingsley, no. Kingsley cut him off. Listen to me. This is important. Vivica was gesturing with her hands. She was upset. The bowl slipped. It fell. It was an accident. Everyone got that. Vivica nodded, her hands clenched in her lap. Delbert looked at Bernice. Bernice looked at the floor. Everyone got that. Kingsley repeated, his voice harder now. Kingsley, Bernice said quietly. You don't need to think, Kingsley said. You just need to tell them what I told you. It was an accident. Say it. Silence. Then the doorbell rang. Kingsley's face went tight. Remember, accident. That's all. He walked to the door and opened it. Officer Daniels stood on the porch with his partner, both in uniform, both with the professional calm of people who've done this 1,000 times. Mr. Whitfield? Officer Daniels said. Yes, Kingsley said. I'm Officer Daniels. This is Officer Martinez. We're here to follow up on an incident that occurred earlier this evening at an address on Hamilton Street. May we come in? Kingsley stepped aside. They came in. They asked to speak with each person separately, one by one. Kingsley went first, told his version. Accident, gesture, slip, unfortunate. Nobody meant for anyone to get hurt. Vivica went second. Same story. She was upset. She was gesturing. The bowl slipped from her hands. She felt terrible. Then Officer Daniels asked to speak with Delbert. They sat at the kitchen table, just the 2 of them, Officer Martinez in the living room, with the others to keep them separated. What exactly did you see happen tonight, Mr. Gallagher? Officer Daniels asked. Delbert was 60 years old. He'd worked construction for 30 years. He'd raised a daughter. He'd made mistakes in his life, bad investments, poor choices, trusted the wrong people. But he wasn't a liar. She stood up. Delbert said slowly, grabbed the bowl with both hands and threw it at him. Directly at him. It wasn't an accident. Officer Daniels wrote that down. You're certain? Yes, Delbert said. I was sitting 3 feet away. I saw the whole thing. Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. Next, Officer Daniels spoke with Bernice. Same table, same questions. Mrs. Gallagher, can you tell me what you saw? Bernice's hands were shaking. She'd been crying on and off for the past 3 hours. Her daughter had just committed assault. Her son-in-law had just tried to coach her to lie to police. The Gallaghers had realized finally that Kingsley had lied to them from the very beginning. About the house, about Wilfred's agreement, about everything. My daughter threw hot soup at Wilfred. Bernice said, her voice barely above a whisper. On purpose. During Christmas dinner. I watched her do it. Officer Daniels made a note. Was there any indication it was accidental, a slip? A gesture gone wrong? No, Bernice said. She picked up the bowl. She stood up. She threw it. It was deliberate. Thank you, Mrs. Gallagher. Officer Daniels and his partner regrouped in the hallway, compared notes, then returned to the living room where everyone was waiting. Kingsley was standing near the fireplace. His arms crossed his face tight, with barely controlled tension. Chapitre. Based on the statements we've collected, Officer Daniels said, we have conflicting accounts of what occurred. Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield have stated the incident was accidental. Mr. and Mrs. Gallagher have stated it was intentional. We'll be including all statements in our report to the district attorney's office. That's when Kingsley lost control. You were supposed to... He started whirling on Delbert and Bernice, then stopped himself mid-sentence, his face going white as he realized what he was about to say. But it was too late. Officer Daniels was already writing. You were supposed to what, Mr. Whitfield? The officer asked calmly. Kingsley's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Oh, nothing, he said. But the damage was done. He switched tactics, his voice rising, shaking with rage. After everything we tried to do for you, he shouted at the Gallaghers. We let you come to our home. We helped you. We tried to get you into a real house. This is how you repay us, by lying to the police. We didn't lie, Delbert said quietly. We told the truth. You, Officer Daniels, just kept writing. Every word, every sentence, every admission that Kingsley had expected them to lie, had tried to orchestrate a false statement, had believed his in-laws owed him their dishonesty in exchange for his help. Vivica sat on the couch, her face buried in her hands, understanding probably for the first time that they had just destroyed their own defense. Officer Daniels finished writing, closed his notepad, and looked at Kingsley. We'll be in touch, he said. Then he and his partner left. The door closed. Kingsley stood in his living room, breathing hard, his fists clenched, staring at Delbert and Bernice like they'd just committed an unforgivable betrayal. And in his mind they had. Because in Kingsley's world, family was supposed to lie for you. Family was supposed to protect you from consequences. Family was supposed to choose loyalty over truth. But the Gallaghers had chosen differently. I heard about all of this weeks later when Bernice came to my house to apologize. She told me exactly what happened that night, and at the end, she said something I'll never forget. When Kingsley screamed at us in front of the police, demanding to know why we didn't lie for him, that's when I knew we had been lied to from the very start. That realization that they'd been lied to from the start changed everything for the Gallaghers. They stopped defending Kingsley. They stopped making excuses. And when the district attorney's office called them to confirm their statements, they didn't hesitate. The week after Christmas, while my shoulder was still healing under clean bandages, Alaric filed the paperwork for a temporary protective order. We met in his office on a cold January morning, 3 days after New Year's. We can get a temporary protective order granted within 48 hours, Alaric said, sliding a form across his desk for me to review. Under Pennsylvania law, when there's documented assault with medical records and police reports, judges act fast. It'll give you legal space while this moves forward. I read through the petition. Legal language. Formal phrasing. But the substance was simple. Kingsley Whitfield and Vivica Whitfield are prohibited from contacting Wilfred Whitfield directly or indirectly by any means until further order of the court. They can't contact me at all, I asked. Not even through someone else. Not at all, Alaric said. No phone calls, no texts, no emails, no third-party messages, no showing up at your house. If they try, it's contempt of court. Any violation gets documented and adds to their legal problems. I signed the form. Alaric filed it that afternoon. 46 hours later, a judge granted it. The temporary protective order was served on Kingsley and Vivica at their rental home in Emmaus on January 4th. An officer handed them each a copy, explained the terms, and confirmed they understood zero contact with Wilfred Whitfield under penalty of law. That evening, I sat in my living room, completely alone. My phone sat on the coffee table in front of me. Silent. Dark. No calls, no texts, no vibrations, no notifications. Nothing. The silence. The absolute silence. I hadn't realized how much noise fear makes until it stopped. For 3 months from October through Christmas, my phone had been a weapon aimed at me. Every buzz was a potential threat. Every ring was another manipulation, another demand, another attempt to wear me down. Now it was just a phone. I brewed a cup of coffee in the kitchen, the same way I'd been making coffee for 40 years. Ground beans, hot water, the smell filling the small space. I sat down at my kitchen table and drank it slowly, looking out the window at the January snow covering my backyard. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. No one was demanding anything from me. No one was questioning my choices. No one was telling me I didn't deserve happiness, or that my house was wasted on me, or that I owed them something I'd never agreed to give. I looked at the old USPS mailbag hanging in the corner near the coat rack and thought we did it right. Followed the protocol. Every step. Every rule. Delivered the evidence exactly where it needed to go. I finished my coffee, washed the cup, and went to bed at 9 p.m. I slept through the night for the first time since October. Then mid-January, Kingsley discovered what I'd done. I don't know how he found out. Maybe he hired a lawyer who did a courthouse filing search. Maybe he called someone at the county recorder's office. Maybe he just finally put the pieces together. But somehow he learned about the updated will and the revocable living trust. The entire estate, the house with its value of $210,000, the retirement savings of $85,000, all of it placed in an irrevocable trust for my 2 grandchildren until they reached age 25. Alaric Riddle named as trustee. Kingsley would inherit exactly nothing. The phone calls started that same day. My screen lit up Kingsley Whitfield. I didn't answer. It rang again 5 minutes later. Kingsley Whitfield. I didn't answer. Again. Kingsley Whitfield. Again. Kingsley Whitfield. Again. 7 times in 1 hour. Each time my phone recorded it. Each time the system logged it. Each time it went to voicemail. I listened to one of them just to confirm what I already knew. Kingsley's voice tight and desperate. Dad, we need to talk. You can't do this. That house is call me back. We need to fix this before it's too late. Before it's too late. As if there was still time to undo what had already been set in stone, legally documented, officially filed permanently. The phone kept ringing, 7 times, 12 times, 20. I didn't answer once. Instead, I did exactly what Alaric had instructed me to do. I forwarded every single call log to him, every single voicemail, every single text message that came through, and there were dozens. Dad, please, just talk to me. This isn't fair. You're making a mistake. Call me now. Each one was a violation of the protective order. Each one was documented evidence of contempt. Each one made Kingsley's legal situation worse. And he kept doing it anyway, because he was panicking. because he'd just realized that the house he'd been counting on inheriting the asset he'd been planning to control, the equity he'd been scheming to access, was gone. Legally untouchable. Protected in a trust he couldn't break, managed by an attorney. He couldn't manipulate, designated for children who wouldn't have access to it for another 15 years at minimum. His entire plan had collapsed, and in his desperation, he was making it worse. I sat in my living room that evening watching the phone light up again and again. Kingsley Whitfield, Kingsley Whitfield, Kingsley Whitfield. Every single call is a violation, I thought. Every single call is evidence. I looked at my phone screen, Kingsley's name lighting up for the 7th time that evening. I didn't pick up once. Instead, I forwarded every single call, every single voicemail directly to Alaric. Each one was just another piece of evidence. By the end of January, Alaric had compiled 43 documented violations of the protective order. 43 phone calls, 21 text messages, 2 emails sent through a third party, every single one forwarded, logged, filed. In February, Alaric called to tell me Kingsley had hired his own attorney and was demanding to see the old will, the one from 5 years ago, not long after Martha died. Kingsley's attorney sent this, Alaric said when I met him at his office the next morning. He slid a document across the desk. It's a copy of your will from 5 years ago, the one you signed in 2019. I looked at it, my signature at the bottom. The date, April 15th, 2019. 6 months after Martha passed. I remember signing that, I said. Right after Martha died. She'd always wanted me to have everything documented properly. Do you remember what it said? Kingsley was the primary heir, I said. House savings, everything. He was my only child. It made sense then. Alaric nodded. He thinks this supersedes the trust. It doesn't. Why not? Pennsylvania law, Alaric said, tapping the document. A revocable living trust executed later, like the one you signed in October, legally supersedes and revokes all prior wills, automatically. The moment you signed that trust, this will become void, meaningless. Can he argue I wasn't of sound mind when I signed the trust? Alaric smiled slightly. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a lawyer who'd already prepared for every possible angle. You have medical records from the hospital documenting your mental clarity on Christmas Eve. You have witness statements from police officers. You have 3 months of documented planning with me, emails, appointments, signed documents, all showing deliberate, competent decision-making. And you have 0 history of cognitive decline, dementia, or any condition that would suggest diminished capacity. He leaned back in his chair. Kingsley has an old piece of paper and desperation. That's it. Did Kingsley really think I had spent 3 months preparing for one moment and forgotten to protect the rest? Did he think I'd walk into Alaric's office in October, set up a revocable trust update, my will establish legal protections, and somehow leave a gaping hole in the plan? 36 years carrying mail taught me one thing. You check every address twice. You make sure every piece goes to the right place. You don't leave loose ends. What happens next? I asked. I send a response to his attorney explaining exactly why the 2019 will is void, Alaric said. I cite the relevant Pennsylvania statutes. I include documentation proving your mental competency. And I politely suggest they withdraw whatever legal action they're considering before it costs their client money. Will they listen? No, Alaric said. Kingsley's desperate. He's going to file anyway. He was right. 3 weeks later, in early March, Kingsley filed a formal lawsuit to contest the revocable trust. The petition claimed 3 things. First, that Wilfred Whitfield lacked mental capacity to execute a valid trust in October. Second, that the trust was created under undue influence from attorney Alaric Riddle. Third, that the 2019 will represented Wilfred's true intentions and should be honored. Alaric read me the filing over the phone. "Yeah, he filed the lawsuit," he said. "We'll move to dismiss immediately." "How long will this take?" "Not long," Alaric said. "He has no standing, no evidence, and no chance." Alaric's motion to dismiss was filed the same day. It was 17 pages long. It cited Pennsylvania statutes on trust law competency standards and burden of proof. It attached my medical records from December showing full cognitive function. It attached the police report documenting my clear, detailed statement to Officer Flynn. It attached signed affidavits from Dr. Brennan and Officer Daniels confirming my mental clarity. It attached a timeline showing 3 months of deliberate planning with no signs of confusion, coercion, or diminished capacity. And it pointed out clearly, precisely, devastatingly, that Kingsley Whitfield had zero legal standing to contest a trust he was not a beneficiary of. The grandchildren were the beneficiaries, not Kingsley. He wasn't challenging his own disinheritance. He was trying to challenge his children's inheritance. The judge scheduled a hearing for late March. I didn't attend. Alaric represented me. I stayed home, drank coffee, read the newspaper, and waited. Alaric called me at 2 p.m. "I'm dismissed," he said, "with prejudice." "So what does that mean?" "It means the case is over. Kingsley can't refile it. The judge found his claims frivolous and without merit. And because of that," he paused, the judge ordered Kingsley to pay legal fees for both sides, his attorney's fees and ours. I was quiet for a moment. "How much?" My fees for this case are about $4,000, Alaric said. His attorney probably charged him similar. So roughly $8,000 total that Kingsley now owes. $8,000 for a lawsuit that lasted 3 weeks, for a desperate attempt to overturn a legally sound trust, for false hope built on an old piece of paper that meant nothing. 3 weeks. The judge took 3 weeks to dismiss everything Kingsley had pinned his hopes on. "Thank you, Alaric," I said. "You're welcome," he said. "And Wilfred, this is over now. Legally, he's out of moves. The trust is ironclad. The protective order stands. The assault case against Vivica is moving forward. Kingsley has no legal pathway left." "Good," I said. We hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a moment, looking out the window at the March afternoon. Early spring, the trees just starting to bud. Snow melting in patches across the backyard. I thought about Kingsley sitting somewhere right now, probably in his rental house in Emmaus, staring at a bill for $8,000, and the reality that he'd lost everything he'd been scheming for. The house gone placed in trust for his children. The savings gone placed in the same trust. The inheritance he'd counted on gone legally unreachable. The assault case still pending, still moving forward toward prosecution. The protective order still active, still enforceable, and now legal fees he couldn't afford. I received the news that Kingsley lost the lawsuit on a crisp March morning while I was watering the plants on my porch. I read the email Alaric sent, set my phone down, and went right back to watering my plants. The lawsuit was over. Kingsley had lost. $8,000 poorer, 0 legal options remaining, and still desperately searching for a way to undo what couldn't be undone. In April, I noticed a strange vehicle parked outside my house on a Tuesday afternoon, a sedan with a real estate company logo on the door. I was in the kitchen making lunch when I saw it through the window. A man in his 40s, business casual clothes, standing on the sidewalk with a camera taking photos of my house from multiple angles. He didn't knock, didn't approach the door. Just photographed the exterior, made notes on a clipboard, and drove away 20 minutes later. I wrote down the license plate number and the company name, Norwood and Associates Realty. 2 days later, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Whitfield." The voice was professional, careful. "Yes," I said. "My name is Cedric Norwood. I'm a real estate agent. I need to talk to you about something." Cedric Norwood, a 47-year-old real estate agent with 22 years in the Lehigh Valley area, called me directly after recognizing my address, the same address where he'd received his mail for over 2 decades. "Why, I'm calling because your son hired me to conduct an appraisal of your property," he said. "External only since he doesn't have access to the interior. But Mr. Whitfield, I recognized your address the moment I saw the contract." I was quiet. "You delivered my mail for over 20 years," Cedric continued. "I lived on Cedar Street, the blue house with the white fence. You delivered my mail every single day. Rain, snow, 100-degree heat, you were always there. Always on time. Always professional." I remembered Cedar Street, third house on the left. Blue siding, white picket fence that needed paint for about 5 years before they finally got around to fixing it. "I remember," I said. "Mr. Whitfield, I want you to know I'm refusing this contract. I told your son I can't take the job. I don't know what's happening in your family, and it's not my business. But I know who you are. I know what kind of man you were for this community for over 3 decades. I can't do this to you." His voice was firm, certain. "I wanted you to know what he tried," Cedric said. "And I wanted you to know that some of us remember." I hung up the phone and sat completely still for a long time. 36 years. Every letter delivered to the right door. Every package handled with care. Every smile at every threshold, even when my knees ached and my back screamed and the snow was coming down sideways. I never viewed it as building relationships. I never thought of it as an investment in community trust. I just did my job, every single day, the way it was supposed to be done. And now, decades later, that job was protecting me from my own son's desperation. A week later, in early May, Alaric called. The DA formally charged Vivica, he said, without preamble. Simple assault, second-degree misdemeanor under 18 PACS Section 2701. The evidence was too strong to decline prosecution. "What happens to her now?" I asked. She'll be arraigned. Then her attorney will probably negotiate a plea deal. First offense misdemeanor charge, no prior criminal history. She'll likely get community service mandatory anger management classes and a fine. Maybe probation. Unlikely she'll see jail time. And if she doesn't take a plea, then it goes to trial," Alaric said. "And she loses. The medical records, police reports, witness statements, it's unassailable. Her best option is to plead guilty, accept the consequences, and move on." I thanked him and hung up. 3 days after Vivica's indictment, I got a call from Ruth Martha's sister, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. "Oh, Wilfred, I need to tell you something," she said. "Kingsley called me yesterday. He's telling everyone that Vivica did this on her own, that he had nothing to do with it, that he tried to stop her." "But what exactly did he say?" "He said, this isn't my fault. Vivica acted completely on her own. I was just sitting there. I didn't throw anything at anyone." Those were his words. I was quiet. "Wilfred, I heard about it through the family," Ruth continued. "Not from someone who was there, just what's been going around." "Wilfred, I'm telling you because it doesn't sound right," Ruth continued. "He's your son. But what he's doing, throwing his wife under the bus when she's facing charges, that's not right. I thought about Christmas Eve. The argument. Vivica standing up. Kingsley's face as he watched his wife throw that bowl of scalding soup. And I thought about what he said right after. Those cold words while I sat there with soup burning through my shirt onto my skin. You should have just agreed from the start. Not, I'm sorry, not, are you okay? Not, that was wrong. You should have just agreed. That didn't sound like an innocent bystander. That sounded like someone whose plan had just succeeded. And now, months later, when Vivica was facing legal consequences for the violence he'd orchestrated, when his wife was looking at community service and anger management and a permanent criminal record, Kingsley was telling everyone he had nothing to do with it. The man who orchestrated everything was pretending to be the innocent bystander. He was throwing his own wife under the bus to save himself. "I thank you for telling me," I said to Ruth. "I'm sorry this is happening," she said. "So am I said. We hung up. I sat in my living room, looking at the USPS mailbag hanging in the corner. 36 years of service. 36 years of doing the job right, treating people with respect, delivering every letter to the right address, no matter what. I never thought that would matter this much. I never thought it would be the thing that protected me when everything else fell apart. That investment those relationships built over decades of showing up every single day had protected me in ways I never imagined. But there was one relationship it couldn't fix. In June, 2 months after the protective order expired, Kingsley came to my house. He knocked on the door around 2 in the afternoon. I saw him through the window before I opened it, thinner than he'd been at Christmas, wearing a wrinkled shirt and jeans, standing on my porch like a stranger asking for directions. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Dad," he said. I said. We stood there for a moment, neither of us moving. Can I come in?" he asked. "I need to talk to you." I stepped aside. He walked past me into the living room, the same room where he'd eaten Christmas dinner 6 months earlier, the same room where this all began. He didn't sit down. Neither did I. "Vivica's trial is in 3 weeks, he said. "Her lawyer says if you write a letter to the DA, a victim impact statement saying you don't want her prosecuted, they might reduce the charges. Maybe drop them completely." There it was, the reason for this visit. Not to apologize, not to ask how I was healing, not to acknowledge what he'd done, to ask me to make his problem go away. "The DA already has my statement," I said. "From the hospital, from the police report." I know," Kingsley said, "but that was right after. You were emotional. Now you've had time to think, time to calm down. You could tell them it was all a misunderstanding, that you don't want to press charges." "I didn't press charges," I said. "The state of Pennsylvania did. That's how assault works. But you could ask them to drop it." I looked at my son, really looked at him. His hands were trembling slightly. He was holding a manila envelope, probably the letter he wanted me to sign, already drafted by Vivica's attorney, just needing my signature to make all their problems disappear. But he didn't offer it to me, didn't even mention it, which told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't genuine remorse. This was a calculated move, a last-ditch attempt to use whatever relationship we had left to fix what he'd broken. "I need to know one thing, Kingsley," I said quietly. He looked up at me. "Are you apologizing because I was hurt, or because you lost the house?" The question hung in the air between us. Kingsley opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. I waited. He looked down at his shoes, at the envelope in his hands, at the floor, anywhere but at me. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. 20. He couldn't answer, because we both knew the truth. "You should go," I said. He looked up, his eyes wet but not crying. "Dad, you should go, Kingsley." He stood there for another moment, then turned and walked out the door without another word. I watched him drive away. I felt no satisfaction, no victory, just a deep, hollow sadness for the boy I'd raised and the man he'd become. 2 days later, there was another knock on my door. Delbert and Bernice Gallagher. They stood on my porch, looking like people who'd aged a decade in 6 months. Delbert's hair had gone almost completely gray. Bernice's face was drawn, her eyes red-rimmed. "Wilfred," Bernice said, her voice breaking slightly. "Can we talk to you, please?" I let them in. We sat in the living room, the same room where they'd sat on Christmas Eve, believing they were about to receive help they desperately needed. "We came to apologize," Delbert said, "and to tell you the truth." "I'm listening," I said. Bernice twisted her hands in her lap. "Kingsley came to us in early December, before Christmas. He said he'd talk to you about our situation, About us losing the house living in that motel. Shtito. He told us you'd agreed, Delbert continued. He said you wanted to help, that you'd signed papers giving us permission to stay in your upstairs bedrooms temporarily, while we got back on our feet. I was quiet. He said it was all arranged. Bernice said, her voice thick with emotion. He said you wanted Vivica protected in case something happened to you, that this was proper estate planning. We thought we were helping you do the right thing. You believed him, I said. We did, Delbert said. He's our son-in-law. He's the father of our grandchildren. Why would he lie? Bernice's perfume drifted across the space between us, jasmine, the same scent Martha used to wear. It triggered something in my memory, that Christmas dinner, the table set with Martha's good china, the soup simmering on the stove the moment before everything shattered. The symmetry was painful. When we went to that Christmas dinner, Bernice continued, we thought it was just a formality, a nice family announcement. We had no idea you didn't know. No idea he'd lied to us. When did you realize? I asked. When you said no, Delbert said. When you looked confused. When Kingsley got angry. That's when we started to understand. And then when the police came, Bernice added, and Kingsley tried to get us to lie about what happened, that's when we knew for certain. We'd been used. I'm so sorry, Delbert said. We should have questioned it. Should have called you directly. But we were desperate, and he was convincing. I looked at these two people sitting across from me. People who'd lost everything. People who'd been manipulated by their own son-in-law into believing a lie that made them complicit in a scheme against me. They weren't evil. They weren't greedy. They were just desperate people who'd trusted someone they shouldn't have. I believe you, I said. Bernice started crying. Thank you, Delbert said quietly. That means more than you know. They stood to leave. I walked them to the door. Delbert and Bernice left, shoulders slumped, aged 10 years in 6 months. I watched them walk to their car, a couple who raised a daughter they're proud of and trusted a son-in-law who destroyed them. They weren't evil. They just trusted the wrong person. I know exactly how that feels. After they left, I sat in that living room for a long time thinking about trust. How easy it is to give. How hard it is to rebuild once it's broken. How sometimes the kindest thing you can do is recognize that some people were victims too. The phone rang while I was deadheading Martha's roses, and Alaric's voice told me Vivica took a deal. She pleaded guilty, he said. Simple assault, M2 misdemeanor. The DA offered standard terms, and she accepted. I set down my gardening shears and walked inside, phone pressed to my ear. What does that mean? I asked. $500 fine, 60 hours of community service, 6 months of mandatory anger management classes. It goes on her record permanently, but no jail time. I sat down at my kitchen table. That's it, I said, for throwing scalding soup at someone. For a first offense, misdemeanor with no prior record, yes, Alaric said. The system isn't built for justice. It's built for processing cases. She'll pay $500 and spend 60 hours picking up trash on the highway. 6 months of sitting in a circle talking about her feelings with a court-appointed counselor. And then it's over. And then it's over, he confirmed. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, just a hollow space where all those emotions used to be. Justice on paper doesn't heal the scar on my shoulder. It doesn't erase the memory of that Christmas Eve table. It doesn't give me back the son I thought I had. What about Kingsley? I asked. He was never charged, Alaric said. Only Vivica committed the physical act. Kingsley's consequences are civil, the protective order violations, the failed lawsuit, the legal fees. But criminally, the state has nothing on him. Of course not. The mastermind never gets his hands dirty. Thank you for letting me know, I said. We hung up. I sat in my kitchen, looking around at the house I'd lived in for 30 years. The kitchen where Martha used to bake bread on Sunday mornings. The living room where we'd watched our son grow up. The dining room where Christmas Eve had turned into evidence. Every room held a memory. But now they all felt tainted, contaminated by what had happened here. The house is a museum of betrayal. Now every room displays an artifact of trust. Broken every corner whispers what was stolen. I picked up my phone and called Winifred. "Hello?" Her voice was warm, familiar. "Do you remember what you said?" I asked, "about starting over somewhere else." A pause. "I do," she said. "Did you mean it?" "Yes," she said. "Did you—" "Lake or ocean?" I asked. I could hear her smile through the phone. "What lake?" she said. "Ocean's too big. Too loud. Lake is calm. You can see the other shore. Chakika." I agreed. "I want to see the other shore." We talked for an hour. About small towns in Pennsylvania with lakefront properties. About what it would be like to wake up somewhere new. About leaving behind the weight of the past and choosing something different. 2 weeks later, I sat across from Alaric in his office. "I want to sell the house," I said. He didn't look surprised. "You don't have to," he said. "The trust is ironclad. Kingsley can't touch it. You can stay there as long as you want." "I know," I said. "But I don't want to anymore. Every time I walk into that dining room, I see that table. Every time I sit in that living room, I hear my son telling me I don't deserve happiness. I can't live in a crime scene." Alaric nodded slowly. "Where will you go?" "Lake Nakamixon," I said. "There's a small cottage for rent. Winifred and I are going to try it for a while. See if starting over feels as good as it sounds. And the house proceeds." "All of it," I said. "Every cent goes into the trust for my grandchildren. They get it when they turn 25. Not a day sooner. Not a penny less." Alaric pulled up a document on his computer. "Current market value is approximately $210,000, he said. "After realtor fees and closing costs, you're looking at around $195,000 net. All of it to the trust," I repeated. "Kingsley gets nothing. Kingsley gets exactly what he earned," I said. Alaric drafted the paperwork. It took 2 weeks to finalize. The house went on the market in early October. It sold in 3 days over asking price, cash offer, quick close. By the end of October, I was back in Alaric's office signing the final documents. He slid the trust modification across his desk. "The full sale proceeds $195,000 after fees and the buyer's higher offer transferred into the irrevocable trust for my 2 grandchildren, managed by Alaric as trustee until each child reached age 25. You're protecting the only people in that family who aren't old enough to protect themselves," Alaric said. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady, no tremor, no hesitation. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt completely certain about what I was doing. I signed my name. Wilfred Whitfield. Not a victim, not a target, not a father betrayed. Just a man making a choice about his own life, his own future, his own peace. Outside Alaric's office window, October leaves fell like confetti, orange and red and gold spinning in the autumn wind. The trees were letting go of what they'd held all summer, making space for what comes next. I watched them fall and thought, that's what I'm doing too. Letting go, making space, choosing what comes next, instead of clinging to what was. Alaric slid the trust documents across his desk. You're protecting the only people in that family who aren't old enough to protect themselves. I signed. Outside his office window, October leaves fall like confetti at a funeral. I'm finally ready to leave. The funeral marked the end of my old life. The confetti celebrated everything I was letting fall away. 3 weeks later, I stood alone in the empty house for the last time. 3 boxes sat on the bare floor. Martha's china, the plates that survived so many Christmases, I wrapped carefully for the grandchildren. Her photographs filled half a box. The old Navy USPS mailbag still hung on its hook by the coat rack, worn soft from decades of rain, snow, and summer heat. I lifted it down slowly, feeling its familiar weight, my name still stenciled in faded white letters on the side. 36 years carrying other people's letters, I thought. Time I deliver myself somewhere worth going. I walked through each room one final time. The kitchen where Martha used to bake bread. The living room where Kingsley took his first steps. The dining room where everything once fell apart. Then I stood at the threshold, flipped off the light, closed the door, and walked away. The house sold for $195,000, money I placed in trust for the grandchildren's future, not Kingsley's schemes. Winifred was waiting at the cottage. Lake Nakamixon stretched out behind a small rental with one bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and a porch facing the water. The first morning I woke before dawn, out of habit, made coffee the same way I had for 40 years, and watched the sun rise over the lake. Winifred came out quietly and set a second mug beside mine without a word. "You can see the other shore," she said. "Just like you wanted." "I spent my whole life delivering to the same streets," I said. "Never thought I'd end up somewhere I'd never been." My pension and Social Security covered the rent comfortably. No mortgage, no debts, no demands. Just two people who had both lost spouses, spent years alone, and decided the rest of our lives didn't have to resemble the first parts. Christmas came peacefully, no arguments, no broken china, no accusations. Just 2 mugs of coffee and sunlight on the water. Then, in early January, a knock came at the cottage door. I opened it. Kingsley stood on the step, thinner, older, worn down by a year of consequences he had never planned for. "I'm sorry," he said. Not because the plan failed. Because I looked at my own father and saw dollar signs instead of a person. He told me he and Vivica were in marriage counseling. She had completed anger management. They were slowly paying off legal fees. "I forgive you, Brian," I said, using his birth name deliberately. "But that money belongs to your children's future. That isn't changing." He nodded and moved toward the door. At the threshold, he paused and turned back. "Are you happy here, Dad?" "Yes," I answered simply. "I am." He nodded once more, then left. I watched his car disappear down the gravel road that winds away from the lake. Winifred came out of the bedroom and handed me my coffee, still warm, always perfectly timed. The old mailbag now hung on the cottage wall, retired, but honored. A reminder of 36 years I spent showing up every single day, delivering to the right addresses, doing the job the way it was supposed to be done. I am 68 years old. I have a modest pension, a small lakeside cottage, and a woman who makes my coffee every morning. I have grandchildren whose futures are protected in a trust. I have peace. Kingsley once called me selfish. Maybe he was right. But after 36 years of delivering what everyone else needed, I have finally earned the right to deliver myself to exactly where I chose to be. And to you listening to my story, remember this: sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you need to protect yourself from most. For years I thought being a good father meant giving my son everything. I thought silence would keep the peace. I stayed quiet when he was rude to Winifred. I made excuses when he started eyeing my house like it was already his. Don't make my mistake, don't confuse enabling with love. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's self-respect. And sometimes family justice starts with you saying no. Here's what 36 years taught me: people will test how much you'll tolerate. And if you tolerate everything, you'll lose everything. My son thought he could manipulate me because I'd never pushed back before. But when you finally stand up, when you document, prepare, and protect what's yours, you're not being vengeful. You're being wise. I believe God put me through this to show others that quiet strength beats loud entitlement every single time. Dad's revenge stories aren't about anger, they're about reclaiming dignity. and dignity is worth fighting for. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to choose family justice over family loyalty? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, real dad's revenge stories about standing firm when it matters most, subscribe to Wise Revenge. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. Just a reminder, some details have been adjusted for storytelling, but the lesson remains true. You teach people how to treat you.